All right, good day everyone. This is Cam Barnard from Latitude Geographics, and I have the privilege today of talking to you about Geocortex accessibility. This webinar will be recorded, and a recording of this webinar will be made available to you afterwards. So if you want to review it, you'll be able to do that. Also, there might be an opportunity for questions, so if at any time during the webinar you have a question, feel free to use the question panel in your GoToWebinar interface to ask your question. I will either answer it at the end live, or we will get back to you, or possibly even post a Q&A depending on how many questions we have. But in one way or another, we will get back to you and answer your questions. So let's get started. This is what we're going to cover today. We're going to talk a little bit about accessibility compliance. We're going to talk about what that looks like or what that means for a WebGIS application. We're going to show you a demonstration of a couple of aspects of accessibility within a WebGIS application. We're going to talk a little bit more about why we bothered at all doing accessibility. What is the landscape, the lay of the land, and what are some of the value around it? And then we're going to give you some practical advice for accessibility certification. We have a number of customers who've gone through this process, and we've got some interesting things to share with you. So this is what we're going to cover today. We're actually going to begin right here with Geocortex Essentials. This is the first in a series of monthly webinars that we're going to do this year. They're going to highlight different aspects of Geocortex Essentials and some of the value that it adds. Many of you are existing Geocortex Essentials customers, but I'm sure there'll be a few on the call today that are not. And so briefly, what is Geocortex Essentials? It is a technology that allows you to do more with your Esri platform. It allows you to build applications more quickly than custom development, and in a way that is safe for long-term future-proofing. That is the value. And then we add to that by providing some unique capabilities over and above the fantastic capabilities that are inside the Esri platform. And today, we're going to focus on one of those in particular. These are a few of the unique capabilities inside of the Geocortex Essentials platform, and today we're going to specifically focus our time on accessibility. We won't be talking about any of those other things. You'll have to come back for future webinars to learn more about those. Now, Geocortex Essentials is based on top of the Esri platform. We are an Esri Platinum partner, and everything we do is designed to allow you to maximize the value of your investment in Esri technology. And so Geocortex Essentials and everything I'm going to show you today around an accessibility compliant web app works completely with your existing Esri platform. That means it works in Portal for ArcGIS Server. That means it works in ArcGIS Online. That means it also works with ArcGIS Server. So these applications are completely pluggable with all of the various components that you're already familiar with. Now, every time we want to talk about accessibility, we need to pause for a moment before we talk about Geocortex, and we need to just highlight for you that accessibility compliance really begins with Esri. Esri has a long-standing commitment to enabling accessibility with their platform. And I've included in this presentation, which you'll have access to afterward, a couple of the links that you can go to read more about Esri specific commitment. In the United States of America in particular, there's something called Section 508 that defines a lot of the governmental compliance for accessibility. And on this section of Esri's website, you can actually download, you can see these accessibility templates. They're little reports that tell you how the various technologies measure up. There's about 85 different reports there. Esri enables accessibility from the ground up. Well, that means that the JavaScript APIs, for example, that everything you're going to see in Geocortex today are based upon, are enabling that accessibility compliance. In addition, Esri also supports the ability for their web app builder, the developer edition, for you to build widgets that are accessibility compliant. And many of Esri's regional distributors that are in geographies that require accessibility or leading a little bit further than maybe other regions in accessibility have done things like building templates. You can see at the bottom of the screen here, Esri Canada has produced a basic viewer template that you can download off GitHub and use as a starting point. So Esri and accessibility compliance go hand in hand. What we did last year was we took all that fantastic underlying support in APIs and in the ability to do this, and we took our existing HTML5 viewer and we made it AA WCAG compliant. We did this in April of last year, and as far as we know, it is the first commercially available out-of-the-box WCAG AA compliant WebGIS viewer, and we're really excited about it. So what is accessibility compliance? At the bottom of this particular slide, I've provided you a link. You can go and you can read the raw specifications, but what I find is helpful, because the specifications cover a broad range of things, is to kind of narrow it down and say, what does this mean for me in the WebGIS context? So primarily what we're focusing on is vision impairment and limited motor control. And to some degree, we're also focusing on cognitive limitations. Generally, when you're interacting with a WebGIS system, you're not concerned about the mobility of the individual. Presumably they're somewhere where they can access a computer already. Speech impairment isn't usually a problem since you're not talking to the computer. Photosensitivity we need to pay a little bit of attention to, but generally there aren't a lot of flashing, blinking things. And again, hearing impairment, usually a WebGIS is not speaking to you. So we focus primarily on vision, limited motor control, and cognitive limitations. Now, again, you can go and read the standard, but sometimes that detailed information can create confusion. And so what I've done for you is kind of recast some of those key things in the standard to what they mean for WebGIS. So from a WebGIS's point of view, accessibility compliance generally means these things. It means that everything supports keyboard navigation. I shouldn't be required to use the mouse. Everything supports a screen reader, meaning that if I'm visually impaired and I have a screen reader, I'm able to interact with the interface in a way that it will speak to me and tell me what's going on. We need to support high contrast and make sure that folks that have difficulty with their vision or certain types of color blindness can change the contrast. And then there's minimum size compliance. Again, this is a visual thing, making sure that the things you're clicking on or the font sizes are not too small to be easily seen. So this is where, for us, our viewer and our HTML5 viewer for Geocortex Essentials has really focused. So before we get into a lot of the technical details, what I wanted to do was show you a couple of quick examples of this. So the first thing I'm going to do is get out of here, and I'm going to show you and speak to, first of all, keyboard navigation. Now, as I do this, play this, you can see on the screen I've used a little tool that lets you see the keys that are being pressed. So as we tab around through the interface, we can tab all the way through the toolbar, select a rectangle tool, hit enter, and now we can use the arrow keys to move our graphic around on the map. Beyond that, we can scale it using the S key or downscale it using Shift S. We can rotate it or the other direction using Shift R. If we hold down Alt Shift R, you can see we've got finer control. Same with scaling. That Alt key is a modifier that says do it more easily. But sometimes you want to work with your vertices. So we let you toggle through vertices and actually adjust them individually with the arrow keys. And you can see as I adjust vertices, new vertices appear to give me the control that I need. I can adjust those vertices. I still have access to rotate and scale. And when we're happy with this, we can go ahead and hit enter and put our graphic on the map. Now let's tab over, and I'll show you another example, which is just the point identify tool. So as I hit enter, I have a point. I move that point around on the map with my keys. When it gets to a spot I'm happy with, I hit enter, and of course it is going to execute an identify. Those are two examples of keyboard accessible tools. But I'm pleased to tell you that we have gone through every single tool in the HTML5 viewer for Geocortex Essentials and made it keyboard accessible. So out of the box, no matter what tools you include in your application for your end users, you can ensure that there is going to be keyboard support available to you. I want to show you one more example. And in order to do this, I'm going to have to use a video. It was challenging to figure out how to do the demos for this particular webinar because so many of these things are interactive. You can't see the keys I'm pressing or necessarily hear my computer's audio. So if you would please, on your interface for GoToWebinar, you see this little blue box. Make sure you click that box so that you're not in full screen mode, because what I'm going to do now is quickly share a video with you and it won't show up unless you're not in full screen mode. So this is your check to see whether you're paying attention. Let's go ahead and share that video. This is an example of spoken feedback using a screen reader. And what you're going to observe is both me moving around the interface and what the computer says, as well as the map itself and how we've enabled spoken feedback for the map. So let's go ahead and do that.
Chromebox spoken feedback is ready. Window Geocortex Viewer for HTML5 tab. I want to ellipsis. Button. Loading map changes ellipsis. Map changed. Center latitude, 34.0586 degrees north. Center longitude, 118.2777 degrees west. Visible features, 75 features visible on trees. 8 features visible on land use. 6 features visible on census tracts. 43 features visible on zoning. Now, I want to menu open. Find parcels by owner, search for parcels by owner name. Button list item. View the home panel, view information about this application.
All right, hopefully that worked for you. If it didn't, for whatever reason, we will be making both the keyboard navigation demonstration video and the screen reader demonstration video available to you, so you will be able to see it. But we put a lot of thought into what it means to do a good job of screen reading a map and the WebGIS interface itself. So those are two examples of the kinds of things that you can enable. And quite literally, if you're an existing Geocortex customer and you have a published HTML5 viewer, today that viewer, assuming that you're running version 2.6 or later, which is the last couple of versions, is already completely plumbed with all of this. It just works. You can use keyboard control, you can connect a screen reader, and you don't have to do anything extra in order to make it accessible. All right, let's continue on. So here's a big question, and I think it's an important one, and that is, why bother? Why should we push forward for accessibility? Why did Latitude Geographics do this? Well, first of all, for us at Latitude, it aligned very well with our core mission, which is quite simply that we really genuinely believe that geographic information over the web can help people, can empower people to make better decisions that affect their lives, the society, and the world around us. And everything we do is targeted at this core mission, and we want that to be available to everyone, including those with disabilities. So for us, it was a good alignment. The second reason that we did it when we did it is really the timing and the technology were ready. We were seeing more and more governments requiring accessibility in their web services. There was traditionally sort of an exemption for WebGIS applications, but we were getting to the point where people were starting to question that exemption, and really the technology was ready. So here's another example. This is from May 2016. There was a major law passed in the European Union that was going to mandate accessibility across the European Union. Here in Canada, from July 2016 to February 2017, coming up very soon, the federal government is looking at mandatory accessibility legislation, and some of the provinces, like the province of Ontario in Canada, have already gone ahead of this and are mandating it within their province. So the climate is changing very much to the point where people expect accessibility. We are seeing more and more RFPs where people are becoming aware of this and are asking for accessibility compliance, and you can see particularly federal governments now are mandating the use of accessibility. But there's another significant reason, and it's this. When you stretch toward creating an accessible system, everyone benefits. Now, I've been in technology for quite a long time, probably 22 years working for software companies, different domains, and I have observed a pattern, and I want to share that pattern with you today and kind of talk through it and prove it to you because it's incredibly valuable. And it's this. We're going to talk about technology. We love it, we hate it, and sometimes it's just plain stupid. Here's an example of a real technology project, the Hydrate Me Smart Water Bottle, because apparently I can't look at my bottle and figure out how much water is left in it. Or this one, the Belty Smart Belt, because apparently the fact that my pants are tight isn't enough to tell me that my belt is getting tighter as I'm gaining weight. So those are two technology products that are a little bit silly. But what happens with technology is this. When it's first introduced, it works and we're amazed. And then it matures, it becomes accessible, and ultimately everyone benefits. So let me walk you through this pattern with a few examples. We're going to start by talking about automobiles. This is the Ford Model T. It worked. It was an amazing innovation. It required you, if you wanted to drive this car, to have a pretty intimate knowledge of how it worked. The idea of driving this car without really understanding how the engine worked, how the transmission worked, how the suspension worked, was ludicrous. People would laugh at you. But then the technology matures. Here we have a minivan, right? Loved by soccer parents everywhere, gets us to and fro. We drive it. We don't really understand how it works behind the scenes. We just understand how to operate it. Automobiles, as you know, are pushing toward accessibility, driverless cars, for example, allowing people that previously didn't have access to vehicles to now use them, to drive them, to get from point A to point B without assistance. And what happens when we push toward accessibility is everyone benefits. So here's a few of the features that are becoming standard on the automobiles that you and I buy every day from the car dealership that are a direct result of the auto industry pushing for accessibility and access to automobiles. One of them that I think is particularly interesting is this night vision assist. For a lot of fancy new vehicles now, they can put a thin layer on top of the windshield, and the sensors that can see things in fog or rain that your human eyes can't are going to pick those things up and are actually going to use augmented reality to highlight them for you and draw your attention to them, pedestrians, other vehicles, things like that, while you're driving your car. So everyone benefits in the end. Here's another example. Let's talk about computers. This is the ENIAC computer. It was one of the first computers ever built. Programming it was very difficult, but it did something that was previously impossible. It worked, and it allowed for complex ballistic calculations that before this just could not be done. Then computer technology matures. Most of us are familiar with this desktop PC type technology. Maybe we traded in our clunky CRT for a nice flat screen monitor, but this still had one fundamental flaw, and that was this, and you probably remember it. When something went wrong, we blame the user. The problem wasn't with the computer, the problem was you weren't computer literate. You hadn't learned to conform to the technology. But then it becomes accessible. The introduction of things like the iPad and the iOS ecosystem took that you have to figure this out and become an expert paradigm and really put it into the hands of everyone. And again, when we push toward that level of accessibility, everyone benefits. Connection technology access is now available to a much larger segment of the population. Things like email and web browsing that previously just would not be in the hands of everyone, now everyone can use. And I remember recently going for coffee at my favorite coffee shop one morning, and I was sitting there sipping, and this lovely elderly couple walked in arm, probably in their mid to late 80s, and they got their coffee and they sat down, and oh, isn't that sweet? And then what did they do? They pulled out their iPads and they started web browsing and they started doing their email. And I went, yep, accessibility for everyone. Not only that, but the simple consumer usability is really driving and forcing commercial organizations, even like Latitude, to build better and better usability and interfaces. They set the standard, so everyone benefits. All right, but let's talk about GIS. That's what we're here to talk about. So in the beginning, it works. Esri, I believe, has done more to advance the use of GIS technology and the mainstream application for the betterment of the world in GIS than any other organization. And the things that they have done truly were amazing. Someone came along then and helped to mature it. Say what you will, but Google Maps probably put maps into the hands of more people around the world than any other leap forward. Then it becomes accessible. So we already spoke about Latitude Geographics releasing this accessibility compliant, WCAG AA compliant WebGIS viewer for HTML5. And as we've done that, everyone benefits. So here's some of the things that we've already learned. We've seen field crews that are using keyboard controls for more accurate digitization when a mouse or a finger on a tablet, for example, is imprecise. We've seen feature summary data originally used for screen readers, like that map summary that you heard earlier in the call, available for summary and tooltips. Because when I'm looking at that park, my human eye can't easily discern that there's 75 or 78 trees there. But the system can tell me that and provide that information to me. So we're already seeing the benefits of this technology for everyone. During the development of our viewer for compliance and accessibility, we put it in front of a focus group. And that focus group had a number of disabled users with a bunch of different backgrounds, but they included someone who was legally blind and someone who had a brain injury and very reduced motor control. Precise control of a mouse, for example, was far beyond them. And here's what we discovered. We gave them a set of tasks to accomplish. We didn't tell them how. We just said, go do this, go do this, go do this. They went far beyond the tasks we assigned them, and they explored on their own. They had a lot of fun, and generally speaking, they were amazed and excited by what was possible. And this makes us even more excited, because what we're seeing is that WebGIS can be put into the hands of your entire community when you're serving particularly public-facing applications. So some practical advice for you around certification. We've had a number of our customers now go through the process of getting their applications certified for accessibility compliance. One of the things we've learned is obviously simple targeted applications, taking some of the large toolbox that you have within the Geocortex application building environment and really focusing on only the things that people need is a good idea. One suggestion we have for you is to start early. Many certification organizations don't actually have an evaluation framework in place yet for WebGIS applications. So get involved early, help to educate the evaluators and explain what it is that you're doing, influence even the evaluation criteria a little bit to show them what they should be paying attention to and perhaps what they shouldn't be paying attention to. One of the things you'll find continually is confusing is that the standards were originally written for web pages primarily, not so much web applications. So you'll sometimes get tangled up in focusing on unimportant minutiae like whether the section headings of a web page are there or not, when really you're talking about a WebGIS application that doesn't really have sections at all. Some things you'll probably expect from this process, things like colors and fonts and other things that you have control over, those assessing your application may ask for changes for better contrast, for example. Again, web page versus web application, just keep that in mind as you're listening to feedback from the person who's evaluating the application. And be prepared to do a little bit of ArcGIS map service work. Sometimes you're going to need to go back and perhaps change the symbology or the label sizes on some of your core ArcGIS services in order to get everything compliant across the board. So in conclusion, when you stretch to make your technology and your applications accessible to everyone. It's not only those with disabilities that benefit. In fact, you contribute materially to improving technology and improving the experience for everyone. We've seen it in automobiles, we've seen it in computers, we've seen it in WebGIS, and I've seen it in many other domains in technology as well. So again, today we were talking specifically about accessibility. In future webinars, we'll focus in on other very specific aspects of Geocortex Essentials. That concludes the formal part of my presentation. You see, I've provided you with a link here to the accessibility landing page on our website. You can certainly go there and check that out. You're also welcome to email me or any of the other informational email addresses that are on that website if you have specific questions or we can assist you in any way. If you'd like to get together with us and have a little bit more of a hands-on live demonstration of those accessibility features and how they work or even how they're configured within the application, we can absolutely do that for you. I'm going to have a quick look and see whether we've got some questions coming in here. So one of the questions is, where do we get a list of all the keyboard shortcuts? It's a great question. We actually show them to you directly on the screen as you're using the tools. They're also contained in the user documentation for the viewer application itself. So this would be the HTML5 administrative and developer guide. But when you actually use a tool, for example, when I use that drawing tool, the tooltip at the bottom of the screen actually listed the keys: R to rotate, S to scale, shift to change the direction, those types of things. So they're actually listed right on the screen for you. Second question here, how do we turn off the screen reader? It's not showing up as an option in the quick tools. Okay, well, we'll follow up with you on that one specifically and make sure that you know how to do it. The screen reader, what I would do if you're just interested in trying it out is if you can use Google Chrome in your environment, there's a free screen reader called Chrome Vox. It's the one that I used for the demonstration and the video that we'll provide to you. And that is a good way of getting a sense of how a screen reader is going to interact with your application. Most of the folks out in your communities who are visually impaired and are using screen readers are probably going to be using a more professional screen reader called JAWS, would be one of the standard ones. And it is going to do a better job even than Chrome Vox, but Chrome Vox is a good place to start. All right. So with that, I want to thank you all for your time, for taking a half an hour out of your day to learn a little bit more about accessibility and in particular about how the Esri platform is committed to it and how Geocortex Essentials, as part of Esri's partner network, is allowing you to even go further and go beyond and do more and provide out-of-the-box compliant WCAG AA accessibility applications. So with that, I will leave you to your day and we will talk to you again very soon.